Make room for Javi.
Welcome to my Project a Day video, where I explain a project or tell a story each day for a year, and I attempt to complete my shop. Today is day 12 of 365, and today's project is assembling racks 3 and 4. Now today I'll be assembling 2 racks at once, so while I do so, I'm going to give you my step-by-step instructions on how to assemble these racks. Depending on the size of your boxes, you'll need to adjust the size of your racks. Step number 1 is to plan and cut for the wood. You're going to be cutting 3 different sizes for the 2x4s. The 4 10-foot horizontal pieces, the 12 8-foot high vertical pieces, and the 60 30-inch rails, as I call them. In my case, since they're exactly 8 feet, I just used the stock 2x4x8, verifying that they were all the same height. Plus or minus an inch doesn't matter. Now, some measurements that you should have on hand is the size of your box. And the measurements are 15 inches high, 19.5 inches the top on the short side, and 28 inches the top on the long side. Once you have those dimensions, you're going to be adding an inch to the height and to the short width of the top. 1 inch is more than enough on the width and 1 inch extra on the height as well, which will give me a good extra inch of tolerance. So now we're going to mark the verticals. I'm going to start by marking the top. I mark all the verticals 3 inches from the top, and from that point, every 16 inches until I reach the last mark. Once you have all 12 verticals cut and marked, we'll proceed to the rails and building the ladders. Clearly keep in mind all your space constraints and build whatever fits. As far as the length of the rails is concerned, I like to cut them all to 30 inches. That's a good size that offers stability for the rack, as well as can handle most sizes of box. The next step is to pre-drill the 30-inch 2x4s, 2 on each side, so they don't split when you're screwing them into the verticals. After pre-drilling all 60 of my rails, I go ahead and insert my deck screws. I'd like to insert each about an inch or so I don't have to deal with inserting them while I'm trying to place it all together. I built a few of these, and this is the fastest, most efficient way I found. After all 240 deck screws, that's 4 times 60, are in place, set aside all your rails except 6, lay out your verticals, and start building your ladders. Always remember which way the 2x4 faces so you know which is the top and which is the bottom, and screw the rails accordingly. Now that you have the rails done, most of the hard work is done. Place the 4 horizontal pieces. 2 will hold the ladders along the top, 2 will hold the ladders along the bottom, and have casters underneath. Place all 4 of them even so you can mark them. Here's where it gets a little tricky. In my case, my 27-gallon totes are 19.5 inches wide on the short side of the top. So I'm going to give it an inch, so the space in between the ladders is 20.5 inches. Don't try to come up with any genius way to do it. Just grab a tape measure, mark 1.5 inches for the first ladder, add 20.5 inches, then 1.5, then 20.5, then 1.5, then 20.5, and repeat all the way up. Double check all your measurements. Grab a 2x4, make sure all the 1.5 inch spaces are 1.5 inches. Make sure all the spaces on the inside of all those horizontals are 20.5 inches each, and you'll be fine. Now that I know exactly where my 2x4s are landing, I'll drill 2 pilot holes spaced out in each one. And then I flip the board over, and from the exit side of the pilot hole, place your deck screws about an inch in. The reason I do this is because when I'm bending down, putting all the verticals together, it's a lot easier to have all the screws already in place. And the lines will be on the ladder side so you can align them. After all the screws are in place, take 2 of the horizontals, flip them with the screws up, and place a caster a couple inches in from either end and 1 dead center, or roughly dead center if there are screws in the way. Now take all the ladders and lay them down and screw in the 2 tops and the 2 bottoms. I found this is the easiest way to build it by far, but the disadvantage to building it on the floor like this is now you need either a hoist or a crane or 2 or 3 guys to lift it up. It wasn't a problem to lift it a couple inches off the ground for me, but unfortunately I wouldn't be able to safely lift it over my head, particularly 8 or really 9 feet off the ground with casters and the extra 2x4s when my reach is only about 80 inches. That's about 6'8" for you non-math guys. While it's on the ground, make sure it's square and put 2 braces across it. The top of these boxes are marked 2.5 inches from the top. The top of the bottom rails are marked 2.5 inches less than 16 inches. The top sits on top of the rails, and I have just barely enough for clearance on the bottom. Now keep in mind that the marks are the top of the rails, which is where the box is going to rest. So the boxes will be offset by approximately 2.25 inches, depending on your box. You're going to be building these individual ladders, and depending on your rack, there's going to be 6 or possibly 7 of them for smaller boxes. Side ladders will only have 1 rail on the inside. All of the other ladders are identical, and they will have 1 rail on each side. Now you can build racks to serve multiple size boxes. The only thing that has to be the same is the width. The long side of this small box was the same width as the short side of the big boxes. So feel free to be inventive. This is a rack without bracing. And here's a full rack that's completely braced. Any questions? Thank you for watching. Feel free to comment. I enjoy reading them, particularly when they're pleasant. Please subscribe, and as always, have a great day.
Make room for Javi.